All right, this video I'm going to show you that it is not any extra work to braze while flowing nitrogen. So here I've got my nitrogen bottle. You're going to have to bring this out anyway because you're going to be leak testing the system right after the stage, right? I've got my set of manifold gauges here, and I've got them hooked up exactly like you would when you're pressurizing the system or when you're checking pressures. Just same thing here. So no extra steps. You're going to have to do this anyway when you do your leak test. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to hook up our yellow hose, your middle hose here that's going to go on to your nitrogen, and you're going to work your regulator. Now there are regulators and there's attachments for regulators that do this for you. I'm a little old school. I've learned how to just be able to barely trickle a little bit of nitrogen here. You just barely want to feel it on your arm. If you make any adjustments, give it about 5 seconds for the regulator to react. And I can barely feel this on my arm. If I held it up to my face, I could feel it on my face. I could barely hear it. Now that it's barely whispering, you're going to just hook it up to your gauge. And my gauges are already turned on, so we're flowing nitrogen out of both hoses and we're sending it to our indoor unit. Now my indoor unit is not hooked up, so these line sets are not hooked up at all out there. So I've got a free flow of nitrogen. It's leaving at the ends of both sides and not building any pressure. Okay, so we've got the piping connected, but we don't have it brazed in yet upstairs. And so we're still going to have to flow nitrogen when we braze those connections upstairs, but that piping is now all connected, so we don't have open lines, which means that we're going to have to create an opening down here somewhere so that nitrogen can flow, but not build up pressure. So again, this is not doing any more work than what we would already be doing on the typical install. So what I've done here is I've gotten my Schrader core out, my valve core out, I've pulled that out, and I put this valve core remover here with the valve open. So now I've created an opening so that that nitrogen can flow. Now I'm going to put nitrogen in through my high side, and this is mimicking what refrigerant already does. It travels from the liquid line through the TXV, through the indoor coil, and back out through the suction line. But instead of obviously going into our compressor, this valve is still off, and so the nitrogen will flow out. This way we can still trickle in nitrogen, very little pressure, just like I just showed you a few minutes ago, and we're not building up any pressure, but we're still displacing that oxygen. So again, we're not doing anything that we wouldn't already be doing, because the very next step after this is to pressurize and leak test, and then we're still going to have this Schrader tool on here, valve core off when we pull our vacuum, because we're going to use a large diameter hose, and all this has to be already set up in place. So we're just doing a couple of steps earlier than what you would normally do, but we're not adding any extra steps. Again, this is not that hard. So now that I've purged all the air out and I'm flowing an inert gas, which is nitrogen, when I braze, the inside of this pipe is going to be clean as opposed to it being really dirty the way the outside of pipe is going to look. Obviously, anyone that's brazed knows how dirty the outside of the pipe gets. That's because of oxidation, that's because of carbon buildup, and that's because oxygen is present on the outside. When we remove that oxygen with nitrogen, we remove that chemistry from happening. The inside of our pipe stays clean, our dryer stays clean, our TXV screen stays clean, our compressors stay protected. This is a proper way of doing it, and as I've told you before, if you don't do it this way and you refuse to get any better, that makes you a hack. Let's go.